Hey yo there, what do you hear, what do you say? Sandkazer here, and today I'd like to talk about treating life with sincerity as opposed to seriousness, right? So, I have a friend of mine who has a lot of trouble trying to pick up women, right? He's been doing it for like a long time now, basically trying to sort of like have a relationship, have like a sort of sexual encounter, and it's been something that he's been trying to do for a really long time now, right? And he starts getting into like Andrew Tate, these sort of like, like Fresh and Fit, like Sneeko, like these sort of characters, right? And he tries to adopt their sort of attitude, right? So he goes up to like a girl, right? He tells me this after the fact, right? He's like, he's like stoic. He's doing like the Andrew Tate pose and stuff like that. He even uses some of his sayings and aphorisms, right? God help him. And he's trying to like pick up this girl, and she says, "Well, I have like a boyfriend," and pretty much, he just the next 10 girls he runs into all seem to have boyfriends as well, and I think that this sort of illustrates a general sort of problem with this approach, right? If you want to sort of be sexually successful, if you want to sort of have like a vibrant social life, you can't really like take this sort of attitude, right? Because it's just not conducive to that goal, right? Imagine you actually met someone who actually unironically acted like Andrew Tate, right? All the time, right? You just wouldn't know what to think. Like you'd think that like, is this like a bit? Am I like being trolled here? Like, is there like a camera that I can't see? Because these characters aren't real. That's just what they are. They're characters, right? It's in the title, right? They're just people that just aren't really the sort of people that you interact with day to day. So when you sort of think about, okay, what do I want? What do I sort of want my sort of attitude to be, right? I think you should try to like think of it in terms of sincerity, right? Because it's extremely hard to sort of mock or ridicule or like show like a negative attitude towards someone being sincere, right? If someone makes like a speech, right, and maybe like some of the words were a little bit like opaque, maybe some of the things could have been communicated a little bit better, but it was said in a sincere way, it's really difficult for someone to come up to them and say, well, like, look at this loser, look at this, like whatever it may be, right? But likewise, right, if someone, tried to do like a good job, gave it their all, right, and you could really tell that they gave it their best, right, it's really hard to sort of like look down on that person, right, because they gave it their best shot, right? Sincerity, it's a bit difficult to sort of enunciate and put into words, but it's a sort of like taking things at sort of face value and trying to sort of like, not be deceitful, basically, right? Trying to sort of like, give it your all, right? Just trying to sort of like understand that person, the person's point of view, trying to sort of like be empathetic, trying to sort of like see, okay, well, what's the disagreement about? Like trying to understand, basically, right? That's what sincerity is all about. I think sincerity is also closely aligned with another virtue that I think is like really important as well. Curiosity. I think that, especially like amongst people I know, there's like an almost, I don't want to be melodramatic and say there's been like a death of curiosity or anything to that effect, right? That's probably putting it a bit too strong, but curiosity just doesn't really seem to be that prevalent anymore, right? Like a lot of people are just sort of content with the sort of things they have and the sort of, and obviously, right, I'm not knocking them down, nothing wrong with being content, but there's such wonder out there, right? I remember I was walking in the library and I just met so many interesting people. I didn't just like by the way their outfit was, by the way they sort of like moved and the way they sort of like interacted with the world. Every single human being has like this like obscene number of like minutia and sort of like like history, and it's all just there, right? And I think I'm it's just, and to see some people who are just sort of like, well, that's all like very well and good, right? But, like, how does that benefit me, or how does that help me? Or, they'll just sort of like, they'll be like, oh, well, that's life, they'll just, I don't know, they'll just sort of like, they'll take it in their stride, but they won't really ever contemplate it, right? I think that's sad in a lot of ways, right? I think it's good to sort of like be curious. I think it's good to sort of think about, okay, well, why is this as opposed to that, right? So yeah, I think that just sort of like treating life, right, as though it was just like a sort of like, it's a fun game. It's like a fun adventure, right? Obviously, there are serious things that go on, right? There's like, death, famines, wars, and that sort of thing, right? But even in those sort of scenarios, I think you should try to still have like a sort of attitude of like, life is a pretty interesting adventure. I want to see what it's like, right? Because what negatives does that sort of attitude bring about, right? Whereas if you treat life as with like gravitas all the time, right, that's going to have like a huge amount of like negative repercussions for your sort of social life and your sort of family life as well, right? So yeah, that's just my sort of two takes on it, and yeah, this is Sandkazer signing off.